my career, in my life, when I've felt angry or marginalised or even ashamed about the place that I find myself. And I'm sure we've all felt those things too. I'm not always good at dealing with those things, but they are a fact of life. You just can't get away from them. They come up. And so I'd like to talk about those things today. And because we're all designers, I'd like to talk about them in the context of design work. But I guess they apply to other areas of life too. As a designer, what I'm trying to achieve is good design. And for me, that is about simplicity. And what I mean by that is that the user understands at every step what is possible, how to get what she wants. That there's this sort of, it's just clear. It all kind of unfolds naturally. And there's an elegance about the design. All the elements are kind of aligned around a clarity of purpose. So the object or the interaction or the service that you're designing speaks to the user with that consistent, clear, single-minded voice. And that's quite a radical thing. Simplicity like that is always radical because it's so rare. Most design doesn't feel simple. Most design is more like this. Designed by committee. And it's a mishmash of ideas held together by the best efforts of the design team. And you've been in those meetings. They're the ones where multiple stakeholders each get their turn to add a design idea. You have one idea, I'll have another idea, we all get a turn and everyone leaves the room happy, right? Or those ones where people high up in the organisation fly in like seagulls and poop all over your work by demanding that their own uninformed ideas are included. And that is the opposite of simple. The artifact that you create, it's like it's talking to you with many different voices at the same time. The user's being pulled in different directions by each one of those voices, and it's distracting and it's confusing. And that's why compromise is such a bad word in design. Because compromise, really, we mean lack of vision, lack of clarity, really a lack of design itself. But pushing back against the tide of this sort of approach is hard. I mean, if you've ever tried, chances are you've left feeling disempowered or humiliated or even ashamed at what you've just been part of and agreed to. And maybe you've gone back and bitched about it or become cynical or talked tough in front of your friends. I mean, we've all done these things. One colleague of mine described herself as suffering from PTSD from a project a few years ago where senior people outside the room just kept pushing their ideas into the design. And it's not a great place to be. Because like anyone with PTSD, there's a chance you're going to go off like a bomb. You become that designer with an attitude problem who throws around their ego and explodes in meetings. And that is not a great look. Because if your tantrum works, that just makes you a bully. And if it fails, then you're a bit of a joke. So nobody wants to be that person. Maybe in some ways it's even better to muddle through, even if at the expense of your own integrity. That seems like an awful choice. So what's going wrong here? In every one of those scenarios that I've described, really is a failure to deal with conflict properly. And I hate conflict. Like most people, I try to avoid it. There's that scene in Fight Club where Tyler gives the club members homework, go out and pick a fight with somebody. And this guy is just being a complete dick. He's just spraying people as they walk past with water. And he has to be such a complete arsehole, doing it again and again and again until finally somebody breaks. Because most people will do anything to avoid a fight. I try to avoid anything that seems like conflict. And in a way, that's good. You don't want to be in fights all the time. But what's happening in all those bad examples that we talked about earlier is, we had stakeholders horse-trading design features in order to avoid the real conflict that was going on in the room. What should we do? Let's do both. When we're playing that game, we're avoiding conflict about something important. And when we're not standing up for what we think is important, that's why we end up feeling dirty. And those situations come up regularly in our work and in our lives, so we need to be able to handle them. And if we get them right, perhaps they can be the most rewarding and important things that we do. This is my favourite book about negotiation. A lot of people talk about negotiation as a compromise, as finding a compromise, meeting people in the middle, splitting the difference. The author here is a former FBI hostage negotiator, and he says, no, when it's something important, like hostage negotiation, you can't split the difference. You know, you kill the hostages a little bit, and I'll give you a little bit of money, we'll both go home happy. It's not a work. And, you know, when we're talking about design and we're talking about, well, can we let the design speak with 2, 3, 4 different voices? It's the same thing. You can't split the difference. So one of the interesting things he says in this book is that you're not really trying to get to yes. He says, yeah, the really interesting point is when you get to no. And no is when the interesting stuff happens. You've found what the problem is, what the thing is you're actually negotiating about, and that's where the creativity comes in to his work. If we can be comfortable with hearing no and thinking about what to do, we've got the chance to do our best, our most important work. And, you know, there's places in life, in work, when you're afraid of hearing no. Those are the places where things just get stuck, the places where things get avoided. And that's where, you know, the emotion builds up, and it's draining. And, you know, nothing seems to change. Everything seems to go wrong. It just drags us down. So I think we shouldn't be avoiding conflict. No is the thing, actually, we need to be seeking out. That's where the interesting creative opportunities are. And imagine what kind of a difference that could make in our work, in our lives, if we could deal with those things better. When I think about conflict, I think about this quote. This is the supreme art of war, winning battles without fighting. And I hate conflict, so this seems really attractive. Maybe it's a bit of a get out. Maybe I can get away without doing the hard thing. But what Sun Tzu is saying is not that you should avoid conflict. I mean, elsewhere in The Art of War, he talks about the danger of avoiding war. He says you're only going to make things worse in the long run. There's conflict here. It's just not fighting. Instead, there's understanding, there's preparation, there's making yourself ready so the enemy just lays down its weapons or stays in its tents. And like never split the difference, this is where the really creative stuff is happening. That's why we have discover phases in projects, to prepare. You know, it's easy to feel this is just a stage where you gather a lot of documents and then pretend to read them. But what if you change that? What if the discover phase is a place where you're seeking out where are all those nodes going to come? Then it becomes the place of maximum creativity, of maximum opportunity. You start to figure out where you're going to make your alliances strong, your rationale flawless, your position advantageous. You can read the tech strategy and understand what frameworks are allowed, and that's good. But maybe you dig a little deeper and you start to find out, well, which of the senior stakeholders disagree with the tech strategy? Which ones have secretly bypassed it in the past? Now you're knowing something useful about conflict. So you do this right, the project goes faster. And we're talking about constructive, creative conflict. If you're going to be ready for that, then those preparations really need to begin with yourself. So I said, I hate conflict. And like my colleague, when certain situations come up, I have a bit of PTSD and feelings come up and I can start acting out and being a bit of a dick. So you need to get beyond that. And I don't mean just suppressing your emotions and trying to, you know, get by them, get past them quickly. You've absolutely got a right to how you feel, and they are there, and they will come out at the time of maximum stress. So you've got to pause and understand them. You know, you don't want to be dumping your raw emotions on people. It's kind of horrifying. So instead, just take a moment and listen to the voices in your head. When you think about those points of conflict, think about what's coming up. What are the voices in your head? Work on them. This is really hard stuff. But, you know, it's easy to get drawn into those sort of internal monologues where you're angry and you're spiraling down to a sort of a dramatic whirlpool of self-justification. And actually, okay, that's good. You know, those voices in your head are now talking to you loud and clear. So what is it they're really saying? Do you hear an angry parent trying to tell other people off? Do you hear a concerned parent just trying to make it okay for everyone? Do you hear a child whining and saying, I don't want to be in your stupid gang anyway, or sticking its tongue out at everyone and making fun of them? All those people live inside of us, and they come out when we're stressed. They come out when it matters. So imagine yourself, as you're looking at this person, as you're listening to this voice in your head, not as a parent who needs to talk down to them or a child who looks up, but as an adult talking to that voice and talking calmly and confidently. What do you need to say to that voice? Take time to bring yourself back to that adult state. It's a slow process sometimes, but it's a necessary first step. Next, you've got to think about what is it you're actually trying to achieve? What are your targets, your goals? What matters to you? Why? I said I appreciate elegant simplicity in a design. That's kind of what I'm trying to achieve, but I do that because I think that's what I'm going to be best for my clients, because that's really going to be best for their users. What's best for my clients and best for the users is kind of the same thing. And if I had to pick one, it would be their users. I figure if you do right for the customer, the business will follow. Understand your goals. Get a good sense of them. What is it you're really trying to achieve, and what lies beyond that? And what actually is your most important goal here? Then you understand what direction you should be heading in. You've got to get your mindset right as well. You've got to be ready for this sort of constructive debate that's going to follow. This is Carol Dweck. She's an educational psychologist, and she really came up with and spent her career looking into this idea of the growth mindset. She says, look, in education, there's two sorts of mindsets. You have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. Students with a fixed mindset go, I have an innate ability, I succeed or fail. And they judge themselves as successes or failures. And they tend to do worse because they constantly fear failure. They constantly fear judgment. People with a growth mindset says, okay, I may not be perfect, but I'm going to improve. The goal is to work. The goal is to learn. The goal is to get better. And those students tend to do better because they avoid perfectionism and focus on performance. And there's a lot of similarities there to agile practice and the things that Stephen was saying earlier. Don't aim for perfection. It just doesn't exist. You'll never find it anyway. And you'll always be disappointed. And probably what you thought was perfect was just an imperfect idea you had. So you've got to be able to put that aside and say, somewhere out there, there's something that is better than today. And I don't quite know what it is, and I don't quite have all the information, but I'm going to get to better. You'll be happier and more successful over time. My favourite story about this is Dave Gray, the author of Game Storming. I was listening to him talk about teaching people to use sketches in meetings to help them think. And at the end, somebody said to him, yeah, but sometimes people just are unwilling and they don't try hard enough. And how do you get over that? And he said, well, you know, it's not really about getting them to some standard that I'm, you know, the arbiter of. He said he was doing a workshop with the board of a large bank. And, you know, as he was doing the workshop, they all had pens and paper and they were all encouraged to just sketch what was in front of them. And at the end of that workshop, some of them had just drawn 1 or 2 lines on their piece of paper. And he said, but the thing is, that's probably more drawing than they'd done in the previous 10 years. So really, what does success look like here? The best sketch I ever had in an ideation session was from a CEO who just drew a cross and put 4 different words in each corner of that cross. And actually, that led to a really fruitful, interesting idea. So success isn't, you know, what you think of it. Don't, you know, look for improvement. Look for where is the opportunity for growth, not some absolute standard. That sounds like you're willing to compromise, but I think there's a difference. A bad compromise is about avoiding fights, by giving in to something that you know is wrong, by giving up on something you think is important. What I'm talking about is accepting you can't achieve perfection, that you don't have all the answers. So we're just trying for better. Once you've worked on yourself, your mindset, the voices in your head, you can start to think about working with your stakeholders and clients. And if you're going to have constructive conflict, then you need trust. Trust makes it okay to disagree. It makes it okay to say no, and to hear no from other people as well. So you may not have the opportunity to do trust exercises, you know, to blindfold people and get them to catch each other, and that may just not fly in your design meetings. I've never done that stuff. You know, for me, what is it that underpins trust? What is it that creates trust? And I think people trust each other when they recognize that they share the same goal. You know, we're both trying to get to the same place, so I know you're not going to do something that I disagree with, something that hurts me. So really at the start of a team coming together, I'm thinking about how do you focus people on aligning around their goals and look for a higher goal each time. So, they may not share personal goals, but perhaps they share team goals. Perhaps they share departmental goals or project goals. Sooner or later, as you move up that ladder, they'll share a goal about the company. They'll share a higher goal. So look for the highest goal around which we can say, this is what we all agree with. This is the single point of truth. This is what we're trying to achieve. I think that's the real value of user-centered design. It gives stakeholders a common goal. The number of times I've brought people into a meeting room and you can feel the tension around the room. You can see these different silos don't get on. And then you start streaming in what's happening in the user test. And those silos break down. Everyone stops orienting against each other and starts to point towards the user. That is the common goal. Help that person. And of course it's the common goal. It's the natural goal of an organization to serve its customers. It's the perfect goal. So use hierarchies of goals to create common goals and to build trust. Oh, and also to find out some of those interesting potential points of conflict. The other part of trust is listening. I mean, the most respectful thing that you can do is to listen. It shows trust by showing that you care. And it gives you clues also about what's really going on. You get new information. You show you've listened by summarizing back what you think you've heard. It'll stick more in your memory and you may get additional information. When you have that trust, you can make it okay to disagree. It's much easier to hear those disagreements. And when you're hearing those disagreements, you can then start to use language that moves people beyond no and gets them into collaborating around finding a solution, making it their problem to solve. Get them working towards a solution that everyone can accept. Look, we both want X, but we have a problem. How do we solve it? This kind of language helps people to come away from I disagree and towards, okay, now I've got to be part of the solution. Sometimes people don't say anything. And you think, phew, we got away with it. Oh, nobody disagreed. I think that's dangerous. Don't take silence for agreement. Seek out answers. Get people to say yes or no. Did they agree? Were they holding something back? If they trust you, if you encourage them, you get to hear some of those no's. And again, you get to find the interesting points where we do need to do something. Sometimes there's an impasse, There's a decision to be made and somebody has to decide. And that may not be you. It might be, the hippo, the highest paid person with an opinion. So what can you do in that situation where you're not actually in control of the final decision? I would say remind people about the goals that you share. Just make sure that your decision-making criteria, the decision-making criteria that you think are important, are on the table. You may not get to make the decision, but there's a better chance of things falling in a way which you're comfortable with. You're just trying to make things better. You're not trying to win. You're not trying to show people how clever you are. You're not trying to get into I told you so. Those are parent and child voices, and you need to let those voices recede and treat people as equals. Put that together. Let me tell you a story about some of that. So a few years ago, we were working on an e-commerce website, and the client had a boss, and that boss had been responsible for the first generation of the website, and that got him promoted to departmental head, and then responsible for the second generation of the website, and that got him onto the board. So now he was like one of the 5 most important people in the company, and boy, did he have an opinion about everything. I mean, literally, it's a foreign client, but his name translated as Mr. Hard, and that's what he was. He had a reputation for that. And he kept in meetings parachuting in and saying, make this thing black, make this thing black. And it got to be a bit of a joke. Our immediate client was like nervously like, did you see, he did it again. And it's weird. He's one of the 5 most important people in the business, and he's spending his day changing the color of the website's buttons. And so the lead consultant on that, she said to him, so what is it about the black stuff? What is it that's going on here? And he said, well, have you seen Globus's website? Have you seen Globus's website? And so there's a break in the meeting, and she says, okay, show it to me. And there's another e-commerce website, one he admires, and their brand is all black and white. And it's a good website. It has that simplicity and clarity. And that's what he likes. He likes the elegance. He likes the modern design. And for him, that means the black stuff they've got on their website. So he's trying to add more black into the website. But really, what he wants is, he wants that simplicity and elegance. So our lead consultant just holds on to that and plays that back to him and says, OK, simple and elegant. And maybe the way to do that is by changing the colours. And this is an omni-channel experience we're trying to do, so I suppose we'll need to make sure that lines up in store, and we should start talking to the stores about that. That could get expensive, right? And he's like, yeah. Well, maybe there's a way we can use the brand to, we can think about the brand and get to that sort of elegance some other way. Yes. That would be good, right? That's what we need to do, yes. And at that point, he changed his tone. He stopped trying to make stuff black. He understood his goals, and he understood that we shared those goals. Everyone was happy. And that's my point, really, that not being afraid of the conflict, but going there. Not chickening out, but listening to that situation, being ready to step into that place and go, OK, there's something going on here. We've got to explore it, got to find out more. You start to do better work. You get the opportunity to do great work. So I think that's all I've got to say. I can't think of anything else that's important or anything that might add value to your lives. Except this. Conflict is the point of maximum creativity. It is uncomfortable, but seek it out, plan for it, prepare yourself, find where no is, work together with the other people around you to create a common way forward. And think how much energy is drained by that feeling of anxiety or anger or stuckness that's around conflict. Think how much bad design comes from dodging conflict by compromising. And just imagine how rewarding it could be if you started to change that. Thank you.